Try to imagine this. It's 2 a.m. You shut off your screen and stare blankly into the dark. You've accomplished so much today. Meetings, reports, emails, deadlines. You even skipped dinner to be more efficient, more disciplined, more worthy of the word hardworking. And yet, strangely, what you feel isn't achievement, not pride, not fulfillment, but a hollow silence you can't quite name, as if a well inside you is slowly opening, silent, deep, and endlessly empty. You ask yourself, why am I doing all this? The harder I push, the less I feel like myself. Why? Is this really progress? Or have I been slowly abandoning something essential? People around you might say, you're just tired. Get some rest. Or, life is hard for everyone. Keep pushing through. Or worse, it'll all be worth it once you make it. Success will make sense of it all. But deep down, this isn't just exhaustion. This is a fracture in your being, and it's growing. You begin to wonder, has society turned hard work into a false religion? Have we unknowingly used ambition as a numbing agent, an escape from actually feeling? And most terrifying of all, have we forgotten why we began? You never imagined that hard work, the thing you once believed in, could become a kind of spiritual prison. You've been climbing, yes, but did you ever stop to ask what tower you're ascending? And if at the top you'll even recognize yourself? You thought striving would bring you closer to your best self, but perhaps without realizing, it's been quietly dismantling your truest self instead. So here's the real question. Why does working harder leave us feeling hollower inside? Why does the race forward seem to pull us further from what matters? Is the problem with our direction? Or with the very definition of success that we inherited? If you've ever felt that midnight doubt creeping in, if you've ever sensed something sacred slipping through the cracks of your busy schedule, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to confront the real question. Not with more hustle, but with more clarity. Because what you need is not more effort, but a deeper way of seeing. You weren't born chasing goals. You were born sensing, breathing, being. But somewhere along the way, that being was traded for becoming. Not because you chose it, but because the world whispered a lie so often it became a truth. You are only as worthy as what you achieve. And so, from a young age, you began to internalize it, quietly, unconsciously. Your test scores weren't just numbers, they were judgments. Your productivity wasn't just progress, it was proof that you mattered, that you were enough, that you belonged. But let's ask a harder question. Who defined those standards in the first place? Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And not just parents, teachers, society, culture, capitalism. They hand you masks, identities crafted from their fears, their unfulfilled ambitions, their projected dreams, and call them success. You try them on, one by one, the good student, the high achiever, the tireless worker, and for a while, they fit until they don't. Until something deep inside you whispers, "This isn't me." But that whisper is dangerous, because it threatens the entire architecture that's been built around your identity. So instead of listening, you silence it. With noise, goals, endless motion, you fill every empty moment with more effort, more output, more performance. And yet, the emptiness grows. Why? Because the you that is working so hard was built on avoidance. You weren't running towards something. You were running away from stillness, from inadequacy, from the fear of being ordinary. As Zen master Alan Watts once observed, "The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. We panic because we've attached our identity to doing, not being. We confuse movement with meaning, achievement with self-worth, hustle with purpose." Nietzsche warned of this inversion. He said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what if your why was never truly yours to begin with? Then all your how, your grinding, your discipline, your perfectionism, becomes a beautifully decorated trap. You think you're progressing, but you're only circling the same existential void over and over again. Worse yet, our culture rewards this madness. It glorifies burnout. It glamorizes overwork. It tells you that the sleepless, driven, hollow version of you is the one most worthy of applause. But applause is not nourishment, and validation is not meaning. You begin to see this isn't just your struggle, it's a civilizational illness, a collective forgetting of what it means to be fully alive, and the more you conform, the more you fracture. Because every step away from your inner truth, no matter how shiny or successful, is a step into disconnection. So here's the real paradox. The world tells you that success will bring you back to yourself, but the more you chase that external self, the more lost you become. This is deeper than burnout, deeper than overwork. This is a spiritual amnesia, so pervasive, so normalized, that most people die inside long before their bodies do. And unless you pause, unless you dare to question this entire machinery, you'll keep running, harder and harder, never realizing you're chasing a ghost. You think the danger is burnout. You think the worst that could happen is exhaustion, stress, fatigue. But no, those are just the surface symptoms. The true danger of this blind pursuit of effort isn't physical. It's existential. It begins subtly. You stop remembering what joy feels like. Not pleasure, not distraction, but that deep, childlike joy. The kind that made your eyes widen when you saw the moon, or when you built sandcastles for no reason at all. You don't notice it disappearing, because you're too busy checking off goals. You don't realize that the deeper you descend into the tunnel of performance, the more your inner world begins to dim. What fades first is intuition. That quiet compass pointing you toward what feels meaningful, not just what's rewarded. Then imagination. You no longer dream for the sake of dreaming, and eventually, desire itself becomes outsourced. You begin wanting what others want, chasing what others chase, feeling empty when you don't have what everyone says you should. This is how the machine works. It doesn't crush you in one violent collapse. It erodes you slowly until you wake up one day and realize you've built an entire life on someone else's script. You wear clothes that aren't yours, speak with words that don't come from your truth, walk paths that were never meant for your feet. And the worst part? You're applauded for it, promoted for it, praised for your ability to disappear into the mold. In a world that rewards masks, being authentic is an act of rebellion. Let's go deeper. Neuroscience shows us that the brain's reward system, especially the dopamine loop, is easily hijacked by predictable reinforcement. Every task you complete, every praise you receive, every metric you hit triggers a hit of dopamine. Over time, your sense of self becomes addicted to this loop. But dopamine is a tease, not a truth. It tells you, just one more task and you'll feel fulfilled. But fulfillment isn't found at the end of a checklist. And still, you chase it. Because that's what the system wants. Not an awakened human being, but a highly efficient performer who questions nothing. Social media intensifies the illusion. You see others winning. You compare your insides to their curated outsides. And slowly, comparison becomes your internal language. You no longer ask, "What do I love?" Instead, you ask, "What will they love me for?" You build a version of yourself that's designed for consumption, not communion. And every time you betray your soul in favor of applause, you die a little more on the inside. This is the invisible cost of unconscious effort. You don't just burn out, you fade out. Your life becomes a performance. Your dreams become strategies, your relationships become transactions, and your presence, your true embodied presence, vanishes. Until one day, you stand at the peak of all your accomplishments and whisper to yourself, "Why do I still feel so far from home?" That moment is not failure. That moment is awakening. Because for the first time, you realize you've been climbing a mountain that was never yours. Let's be clear. You weren't weak for trying so hard. You weren't foolish for chasing goals. You were simply doing what the world taught you to do, prove your worth by how much you produce. But what if real strength lies in unlearning? What if the first act of true rebellion is not more effort, but more honesty? Not pushing harder, but pausing long enough to hear what your soul has been whispering all along? You see, the system survives on one thing: your unquestioned participation. And the moment you stop, just stop, to ask, "Who am I if I'm not performing?" You become dangerous to that system, because in that stillness, something ancient stirs. Not ambition, not anxiety, but awareness. And from awareness comes freedom. Breaking out of the prison isn't about quitting your job or escaping to a cabin in the woods. It's about dismantling the inner architecture that told you your value is conditional. It's about rewriting the script. From, I work, therefore I am, to, I am, therefore my work has meaning. Let's look at those who did this. Take Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Auschwitz, stripped of every external identity. He lost his profession, his family, his name. Yet in the pit of suffering, he discovered something the system could never take: the freedom to choose meaning. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Or consider James Baldwin, who refused to edit himself for a society that feared his truth. Or Frida Kahlo, who turned her pain into vibrant, defiant self-expression. They weren't productive by modern standards. They were awake. And that made them dangerous. Because an awakened human being doesn't just follow the script. They rewrite it, not with noise, but with clarity. So how do you begin? You start by noticing. Notice when your body says no, even when your schedule says yes. Notice when your joy feels artificial. Notice when your dreams feel borrowed. Then ask yourself the questions no one ever taught you to ask. Who am I without achievement? What do I value, not what I've been told to value? What if the goal isn't more, but enough? And then comes the hardest part. Stop performing, even just for a moment. Let yourself be awkward, unproductive, silent, because only in that silence does your true voice return. Not the voice of your resume, not the voice of your parents, your boss, your audience, but the voice that was yours before the world told you who to be. And when you hear it, really hear it, you'll realize you were never broken. You were just buried. And the way out is not by doing more. It's by becoming more real. You've walked through shadows, questioned everything, and perhaps felt the weight of solitude pressing down like a silent storm. Now, you stand at a crossroads where all the fragments begin to form a new whole. Here is the final, unsettling truth. Effort alone cannot fill the emptiness within. No matter how many hours you grind, no matter how many goals you smash, no matter how much you achieve, the void remains if your effort is disconnected from your authentic self. Because true fulfillment isn't a prize at the end of the race. It's the quality of presence in the journey itself. To live fully is to embrace your wholeness. The light and the shadow, the doing and the being, the moments of pain and the moments of joy. Schopenhauer said that suffering is intrinsic to existence, but awakening is found in acceptance, not resistance. It is only when you stop fighting against your own humanity that you can find peace. And this peace is not passivity, it's a powerful presence, a radical acceptance of yourself, just as you are. You begin to see that your worth is not measured by your output, but by your capacity to be present, to love, to feel, to create, and even to suffer with grace. This realization transforms everything. Work is no longer a burden to bear, but an expression of your deeper values. Ambition is no longer a desperate grasp, but a dance with your authentic desires. You realize that the emptiness you feared was actually a call to stop running, to stop performing, to stop hiding. And in that sacred emptiness, you find yourself again. Not the self constructed by expectations, but the self waiting patiently beneath it all, whole, free, and alive. So the next time you feel that emptiness creeping in, don't flee from it. Lean into it. Let it teach you what you have been missing. Because when you embrace the emptiness, you make space for your true self to emerge. And that is the beginning of a life lived fully, deeply, and with purpose.